Today we are taking a look at replicated storage, what it's useful for, what makes sense to store in replicated storage, and what you definitely shouldn't store in replicated storage. We will also build a mini demo demonstrating its use. All right, let's jump into Roblox Studio. All right, now that we're in Roblox Studio, let's draw our attention to the Explorer panel. So in the Explorer panel, you're going to find replicated storage. So replicated storage is a service that's available both the client and the server. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind when you're working with replicated storage and storing items in replicated storage. So all the contents that are stored in replicated storage are available to every player that is playing the game because it's replicated to every single client. So since it is replicated to every single client, if someone is using exploit software, then they can see the contents of replicated storage regardless if you have it placed it in the game yet or not. If it's just being stored in replicated storage so they can see any scripts or any other things you placed in replicated storage. So you want to be careful on what you decide to place in replicated storage. For example, you would not want to place sensitive server scripts in replicated storage that have sensitive information like private keys or items that you want to keep a secret until they are placed in the game. So replicated storage can be used to store a variety number of things. You can store your parts in there, models, remote events, script, a number of other things can be stored in replicated storage. All right, we're going to go over a little demo demonstrating the use of replicated storage. All right, so we're just going to take a look at what we have kind of in place here for this demo. So let's go over to replicated storage, and we're going to expand that. And I have a remotes folder placed in here, which have a remote event called request sword that I've placed in there. And I have a sword that I grabbed from the toolbox, just a free item you can grab from the store. And I also have a coin that I also grabbed from the toolbox. All right, so if you come down and look at server storage, this is another location you can store things. So with server storage, this is only accessible to the server. In there, we have this other tool, which is called Cool Sword. So it's a little better sword than a regular standard sword that we have in replicated storage. All right, and so we also come and look at server script services. So this is a service where you place your server scripts. So let's open this. So I have a few different scripts I've created for this demo. So we have a game init script, a leader stat script, and a sword request manager. All right, so one thing I want to point out with the replicated storage, any item that's in replicated storage is not in the workspace, so it's not in the game by default. So for example, if I duplicated this coin and I dragged a copy of this coin into the workspace, that coin will now be in the game. So if I go and look here, we zoomed it in, this is in the game. Okay, I'm just going to delete this. All right, so let's go back down to the coin that's in replicated storage. So this coin is not in the game. So if you want to place this in the game, we're going to have to clone that and have it placed into the game. So replicated storage is for storing items and things like that that you don't want in the game initially, but you want to take advantage of those and use those things later on. So you can just grab them easily and then clone them and place them into the game. All right, so we're going to open up this game init script. All right, so let's look at the top of the script here. So at the top, we just have some references created to some of the services we're going to need to use for this demonstration. So we have the player service. We got the replicated storage, which is the primary thing we're looking at here. We have server script services, and we have a reference to the workspace. And then if you go down below that, so on line 6, we have a reference to the coin that we have stored in replicated storage. Down a little further, so this is a function we have created called placeCoin. So this placeCoin function is going to receive a position. Then it's going to take that coin template that we have in replicated storage. Then we're going to use that position that was passed into the function, parent the coin to the workspace, and that's going to now place that coin into the game. All right, so the last thing we have in the script, we have this player added event, which passes in the player. And then within there, we get the backpack of the player. We're going to then go down a little further. We have on line 25, we're now pulling from replicated storage a reference to the sword that we have in replicated storage. Then we're just checking to see if we found that sword. If we do, we're going to clone that sword. Then we also have a little just like else here. So if we failed to find the sword, we're just going to have a little warning message. Sword was not found in replicated storage. And at the very bottom here, then we have the place coin function. So we have that we're calling the place coin function that we have a little higher up in the script twice just to place coin in 2 different locations within the workspace. All right, so now we're going to run the game, and let's see how things are looking here. All right, so we have the game running here now. So first thing you'll notice here, in the backpack, we have this sword. So this was a sword we were storing in replicated storage, and we've now cloned that and parented to the backpack of the character when he joined the game. We also have a little coin here that also was placed into the game from replicated storage. All right, so this sword we placed in the backpack of the character when they joined the game. It's just kind of the standard basic sword. So we have that in replicated storage. So we don't really care if anyone that has a client that's connected to the game can see this sword. But we have this cool sword they can also purchase, but they have to purchase this and they don't get it right away. So we didn't want to place that in replicated storage, because we placed that in replicated storage, people could then sneak a peek at that if they had some exploit software to see that sword before they were able to purchase the sword. All right, so part 2 of the demo here is kind of just demonstrating on how they could get that cool sword into the game. So we have a little button here they can click to try and attempt to buy the sword. So I'll click on that and show you what happens there. So we have in the output window, tries to buy the sword, but has no coins. And then we have this little coin over here. If we go and walk over the coin here, we collect 1 coin. And now that we have a coin, we can click on buy cool sword. And now that sword is added to our backpack. All right, so now we have the cool sword. Now let's look at what is required in Roblox Studio to make that work. All right, so let's bring our attention back to the Explorer again, and we'll look at server storage. So this is where we have the tool for the cool sword. So the cool sword we placed in server storage because we didn't want to have it in replicated storage, because it would be replicated to all the clients, and anybody would have access to replicated storage. They could sneak a peek at that sword. But so since we want to keep that private and not accessible to every single client, we stuck that in server storage. All right, so now let's take a look at the sword request manager script we have in here. All right, so at the top of the server request manager, we just have a bunch of services that we made references to that we require for the script. So we got the replicated storage. And then within replicated storage, we have a reference to a remotes folder. So if you look into replicated storage, we have a remotes folder. It's very common to place remote events within replicated storage, and it's nice to have those organized. So you create a folder called remotes, and you put all your remote events in that folder. And then we have the reference to server storage. That's where we have this fancy cool tool placed, and then reference to players, and then a reference to the request sort event that we're going to use to communicate between the client and the server. So the reason why we put the request stored remote events in replicated storage is because we need to have the client access to that remote event, and we also need to have the server access to that remote event. So to understand how that remote event works, what we have to do is we have to kind of look at another script now. So we got to go into the starter GUI, and we have a text button added. In that text button, we have a local script. So this is a local script that runs on the client. It does not run on the server. So it runs on each individual client. So anything that happens in the local script is only impacting that individual client. So let's go and take a look in that local script. So we have our references at the top. So replicated storage, remotes, the player. And for the player, we're getting the local player here. And then we got a reference to the button itself. And then we have a reference also to that request sort event here as well. So when the player clicks the button in the game, we have this most button one click event that fires. And then we have the request sort event in there that fires the server. All right, so we're back now in the sword request manager. So in the sword request manager, after the user clicks that button and they fire that event, we have this on server event in here. So when that on server event fires, we're going to get the leader stats for the player. And we have that coin stored in there to see if they have any coins that they've already attained. And we're going to check to make sure they have the correct number of coins. So we're seeing if they have coins greater than 1. If they do, we're going to subtract that coin. And then we're going to clone that sword and then assign that sword to their backpack. This time we're cloning from server storage and not replicated storage. All right, so I want to take a look at one more thing in replicated storage. We have that coin in replicated storage. Let's go and expand the coin there. And in that coin, we have a server script. So this is one thing you want to be careful about. So if you have any server scripts that have sensitive information, like for example, they might have a certain event that fires a certain parameters, you don't want to have that accessible to the client so that someone can't look at that so they can try to work out how to exploit your game. Or there's some sensitive keys. Any type of server scripts that provide information to someone to exploit your game, you'd want to make sure that you would not put that into replicated storage. So in this case, this is a fairly simple script. So there's nothing in this script that would allow the player to exploit the game. And if there was someone using an exploit and they tried to place this coin into the game themselves using some exploit software, this script is a server script, but even when it's placed it's not placed in the game by the server itself, it's not going to impact the server. So it'll be kind of ignored by the server, and anything that happens within that script, if it's placed onto a client by some individual themselves, it's only going to impact that client. So it's okay to have server scripts in replicated storage as long as there's nothing you want to keep secret. Well, that's it for the demo. So to sum things up, replicated storage is accessible from both the client and the server. Store things in replicated services that are needed by both the client and the server, like remote events. You can place other things in replicated storage, like scripts, tools, and parts. But don't place any scripts in replicated storage that have sensitive information that can be used by a bad actor. So I hope that was helpful, and thanks for watching.